So today I'm going to be talking to Oliver Hewitt from Sears and Duncan Yeardley. They're a really interesting business based in Berkshire. And one of the things which I think you'll get out of Oliver's unique approach is his real passion for providing creative incentives for his team to get them to change behavior. And also their absolute commitment to training and development as a core principle of what makes them a successful agent. This month, they are going to break the record for flexible fees in a given month by one person. And we think, we don't know yet because the month hasn't finished, but that one of their guys might do over £40,000 of flexible fees on his own. And that's a really incredible number. They're very process driven, they're very culture driven, and it's a really, really interesting combination. So I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed making it. And here is Oliver talking about his business and what makes it so successful. So, hi, Oliver. Thank you very much for agreeing to have this conversation with me about your journey with flexible fees so far. So it's great to have you here today.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So for those people who don't know you and haven't yet spotted the branding immediately over your shoulder, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, completely. So I am director of sales for a two-branded business. And so as you can see directly behind me, so we've got two brands under one group. So we've got Sears and Duncan. Basically, long story short, they're two highly reputable independent agencies in the Berkshire area. And an acquisition took place a couple of years ago where we took two sort of massive rivalry businesses, basically, and brought them together to create what is now the DY Sears Group. And I run everything that's related to sales, to commercial, to land, and so forth.
So it's a really interesting decision that following an acquisition that you've kept the two separate brands to run alongside each other. What was behind the thinking in that?
Yeah, I think too easy to put it all underneath one brand was the obvious answer, because at the moment we're running two CRMs, two accounts on Rightmove, two accounts on accountants, whatever it may be, everything was doubled up. So it was definitely a little bit of a headache. But the thing is, we had an issue that we had two incredibly strong brands with strong reputations, and it was very difficult to say, right, well, should Duncan Yeardley go over Sears or should Sears go over Duncan Yeardley? And then we actually started to think to ourselves, well, how can we utilize the twin brand circumstance to our advantages? And this is where we started to come up with a certain elements in the business, such as the collaboration side of things, which is a complete unique USP for us. So a quick brief on that. For example, Ian, if you were on the market with Sears, and after a 3-month period, for whatever reason, the client just said, guys, really like you, but I just want to try another agent. I feel like, it's time to change. Have the answer to that. And rather than going off to a competitor, we can say, well, look, the great thing is you can go on with our sister brand, which is Duncan Yeardley. You get the fresh launch, you get fresh agents, you get fresh database and so forth, but you still got the quality of service that you've got used to expecting. And with that, they get all the benefits in essence of a new agent, but it's handled by the people that they still enjoy working with, and the service standards remain there. So just that side of the collaboration has saved, I won't mention numbers, but 6-figure numbers from going into competitors' pockets, basically. Yeah, so it became very effective that way, and everyone's behind it, and we utilize it in so many ways. So at the moment, there's reason for keeping the brands separate, so long we utilize them effectively. We actually just spoke to Kirsty Franks, funny enough, and straight away she was like, why the two brands? Makes life so much easier as one. But that's how we're rolling with it at the moment.
Yeah, great. So I'm often reminded of Countrywide back in their heyday in Milton Keynes, and I'm sure it's true today as part of the Connells Group as well, is that they had multiple brands. And at one point, I think it was 7 brands competing on the same high street against each other, all owned by the same group. And the view is that each of them accessed slightly different ends of the market despite having the same infrastructure behind them. But unlike the Sears and Duncan Yeardley example, I think they competed against each other like really, really passionately. And so, when you think about Countrywide in its heyday, it was the biggest and most successful estate agency group in the UK. And that strategy of buying a brand locally and then growing it, but retaining the brand identity rather than consolidating into a national brand is the strategy they went for. So it's certainly not without precedent, is it, in terms of people doing that very successfully. So yeah, okay, really interesting. Not what we're here to talk about, but I think it would be something worth considering. Now, for those of you who again, aren't familiar with the brands, aren't familiar with the Berkshire marketplace, one of the things which has impressed me the most in the work that I've done with you guys has been your fee strategy. Yeah. And just, the fact is that you go out there with real confidence. And for anyone who hasn't watched it yet, I've done an interview with Tom Major, who is one of your top listers, who this month is already north of 20 grand of upfront fees, and you're challenging him to go north of 40k of upfront fees, which would be a never done before, as far as I'm aware, record. Tell us about why it is you charge a premium fee in both brands.
Yeah. So a lot of this comes down to a mindset and mentality. And I think, we've gone from really sort of coaching that belief in their value. We obviously strongly believe as the individuals within the business are high caliber. So we very much focus on elite actions in our behaviors and everything that we do. But, putting everything aside up front, we obviously run, and I don't want to talk about the things that a lot of agents can talk about, which is obviously your service standards and that sort of stuff. We run impeccable Google reviews. We've obviously got a lot of British Property Awards, All Agents Awards, and it all sits there. But, the difference is it actually comes down to the bluff element, and something I was discussing with Simon Gates as well the other day, the bottom line up front, what are the differences, and, we've got some really impressive stats when it comes to sort of the speed of selling, the low fall through rates, obtaining percentages of asking prices and so forth. So, on top of all the sort of niceties that we do and the passionate and the caring side of our actions as agents, there's also that side to it. We also have USPs that no one can compete with, and the collaboration is one of them. We genuinely have a solution that if we can't sell your house, we have a sister brand, and not any old brand, also a market leading brand that could come on board as well. So we can dual it, or we can go singular. Obviously bringing in the flexi fees. This is becoming more tailor-making around the client itself as well. You've obviously got the RAN aspect, where we're part of the relocation agent network and the expansion and the reach that we have with that as well. So if you bring in, your core USPs that you genuinely have, so you can go collaboration, you can go RAN, you can go flexi fees and so forth, and then you put your bluff on top of that as well. So your bottom line up front, that's some, it's some decent heavyweight attributes that we have. So long you get that with good agents, and I think it's important to mention, and something we take a lot of pride in is the actual internal training process as well. So we obviously get external trainers coming in, but my obsession in the business is to create geeks, basically just data driven. The joys of a state agency now with AI, access to data, information, so forth. So not only have we got people, helping us to bring that information to the forefront, I'm also quite, getting obsessed, shall we say, on that front as well. And, we're just really feeding a lot of data and knowledge into people's mindsets. And it's great because you can actually walk around the offices, and I can hear people on the phones and they're recalling the information that we're training them on. And that training process, I just think, is fundamentally important in the state agency, something that is kind of sort of, in truth, slightly lacking across the board. There's definitely a greater embracement on it with the current standard of agencies. But, this is something we take a lot of pride in, making our agents intelligent. Because as the market is adapt, as the, the audience is becoming more intelligent, well, just like the old saying goes, knowledge is power. And it's as simple as that. So, you've got USPs elements, you've got your bottom line up front aspect, and then you've got what you are coaching and developing within your team itself.
Which is brilliant. And obviously that coaching, that development then leads to different behaviors, and those behaviors obviously then drive outcomes, and those outcomes allow you to charge a premium fee. I'm going to make an argument though, which is that there are lots of businesses which are a member of the RAN network. There are lots of businesses which could back up the market leader, that they sell properties really quickly, that they get great outcomes, using the 20 EA reports, look, all of that stuff, and they probably invest in training, and they still charge 1%. Yeah. So what is the apps? So charging a premium fee is a decision that you've made.
It is, yeah, and that's the mindset and the mentality aspect of it. And our average fee across a couple of our offices is 2%. With our other, shall we say, more affluent location offices where volume is lower, but the house value is greater. then they're around 1.5%. So a lot of this in going through it, because we didn't just come in and start, right, it's not to say expensive agents is a case of value for money is sort of the mentality behind it. And a lot of it is the agents themselves were sort of negotiating against themselves and always worried about the competition and what they were going to say. I've been a rugby man all my life, and all my coaches have always said, we play our game. We don't play anyone else's game. We play our game. And I kind of took that mindset and mentality, particularly into some of the offices and brands, shall we say, just to change that mentality of actually the quality of who you are, what you represent, the distances that you're going. And look, in the slight argument against kind of what you just said there as well, as in the sense of, well, other agents can say they've got ran and stuff like that. But it's the effectiveness of how we're utilizing these tools. We are, not just a case of saying we've got these USPs or we've got these additional sort of products. It's actually the effectiveness of how well we're using them and actually putting them into practice as well. And the clients are seeing that, getting the real benefits of what, USPs there are. But yeah, a lot of it just comes down to mindset and mentality. I was talking to a colleague yesterday down in the office. I had a manager away. So I said, look, I'll come in, do a bit of frontlining and get involved and so forth. And I could see her writing down the other agents' fees that had mentioned. And I think the client had seen sort of 4 or 5 agents. And I could just progressively see them getting lower. And I was just waiting for her to, turn around and look at me and go, oh, Oliver, they're offering lower fees and so forth. And I just said to her, I said, Lydia, so nothing's changed. It's always been that way. It is. I'm not going to sit here and say how great you are, believe in yourself and so forth. I want you to answer that question to me. And I said to her, do you think you are worth 5%? No, definitely not. Well, why aren't you worth that? Well, because, this is what I do as an individual. This is what we can do as a business. Okay, well, what about the 1%? Are you a 1% agent? Okay. And this client was trying to get them down to 1.4 and then start to create the flexi fee. And I was like, well, we're 1.75. I said, then we go into the flexi fee. And she was kind of looking for permission to start at that 1.4. And I was like, I think you already know the answer. And I want you to test yourself and believe in your core values and everything that you are. And guess what? She goes through that process. It ends up as a 1.75 with a flexi fee involved in it. And it's just mindset and mentality,
100%.
and that is pretty much the core element of it.
Yeah, and there's courage as well, isn't there? There's courage for the leadership to be able to say, we're not going to discount, we're not going to negotiate. This is it. We believe in you. You believe in yourself, and off you go.
Yeah, and also, Ian, just to be clear as well, we are, against agency mindset. It's always a case of got to get the instruction, got to get, we aren't really bothered with our stats or whatever it may be. What we're concerned about is our business plans. What we laid out, what are we going to achieve and how are we going to achieve that? And I think a lot of agents out there are just obsessed with getting instructions, which for me is, sorry to say, a little bit idiotic. It's not business acumen. It's not the right mindset. For example, if we have a client who wants a way over inflated price on their property, they don't see the value in paying the fees that we are charging to be part of the process and so forth. Well, we very confidently tell our team to say, well, don't deal with the instruction, let it go off elsewhere. And then more than likely we'll pick it up today. But we're not going to go through all that process of not being able to achieve that isn't going to be achievable. Them being annoyed with us because apparently it's our fault, where clearly it was a price orientated thing. And then on top of all those headache processes, we're charging a low fee and so forth. So, we're quite happy just to say, sorry, Mr. Smith, look, wish you all the very best of luck. Try the other agent. If they're so strong in their beliefs that they can achieve that, we're unable to achieve that, being transparent with yourself. We can follow through with what we said and design we can do.
So I work with some other very good agents, and some of them have a different philosophy to that. And their philosophy is that because they are the dominant market leader, that gives them lots of reactive business by virtue of the fact they've got their boards up, they've got their brand up, they've got a dominant level of market share. And that then creates a flywheel, which is the perception, and therefore maintaining that market share at all costs. In other words, regardless almost of the fee, within reason, whatever they determine to be reason, that they pursue that as the strategy. What's your thoughts on that strategy, which is slightly different, isn't it? Which is actually we're going to
Yeah, and look, I know agents like that. Some of the top agents in the southeast, and their format is, and it blows my mind. I don't know. Can I mention names? Is that, are you allowed to
Yeah,
do
I
that
mean,
or
it's
not? Yeah, yeah. Well, look, we all know Romans.
sure.
The big juggernaut in the area, and they do incredibly well. This is probably their best performing office
Mm.
in the entire business. And these guys, they don't charge what they're worth in my eyes, but except for their market leaders. So why wouldn't charge more, because you are market leaders and doing what you're doing and so forth. So we've got all our sort of processes and how to achieve our goal, but our mindset is more about getting more out the unit and actually working smarter, not harder. Yes, it's great having the market share, but then you've also got 4 billion clients going through and managing that whole process, extra staff members, extra headaches, whatever it may be. And I think if you have a belief and you set up a culture and a mindset by where your team members feel like they are valued through the commissions that they're charging, well, that just runs through the quality of the mindset of everything that they do within the business, that they know that they have to fulfill the duties to the reflection of the commissions that they are charging as well. So wouldn't it make sense, as in just all businesses, that you don't need to have all the units in the world, right amount of units, and the right amount out of it to remain in the higher quality, but you are achieving your business plans and remaining to be profitable? Well, then that's the business mindset, isn't it? And one thing we definitely coach and breed as a culture is innovativeness, entrepreneurship, and actually our managers, even the team members within, is actually we want them to feel like it's their business. And actually, when they're knocking off their fees, they're knocking it off their P&L and so forth. And I think, because we also breed that sort of culture and environment as well, then you get a completely different view on the business from everyone within the business itself.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my consultative view, having now spent more time working with other agents rather than just running my own business, has been that I think there are two fundamental strategies which work. One is yours, and the other one is the maximalist market share. Where most agents sit is they sit right in between the two. In other words, they're doing low volumes at low fees. And that is a no man's land. If you can genuinely achieve 30% market share in, a decent town with a decent sales rate, even if you're charging lower fees, you can probably make that work, albeit, as you say, running at a really fast pace, and potentially the quality isn't going to be as good as dealing with a smaller number. But where most agents go wrong is they're pursuing the maximalist strategy, but they're not the maximalist agent. They're going for 30% market share, but they're currently at 5%, and they're charging low fees to try and get there. And I just think that's a road to nowhere is my own view on it.
It's dangerous territory. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, road to nowhere. Okay, cool. Right, let's move on to flexible fees, but really interesting. And thank you for sharing. So you came to one of the flexible fees training sessions, which I ran, I think, in June. Was it June or was it April? It's one of the two.
Yeah, I think it got to a point in where I was probably seeing your face too much, if I'm being honest. So we had obviously the flexi fee training sessions, obviously the private stuff that we had
Yeah.
with fellow other agents, and
Yeah.
conferences, and the list goes on.
Yes, well, join the club, join the club of
Yeah.
other people who are sick of the side of my face. And I guess the bit which I'm interested in is your journey from first starting to do flexible fees to where you are today. My observations from having sort of kept in touch with you throughout that process and been a small part of that journey is that it's something which has actually built momentum over a period of time. Is that fair? It wasn't like literally day one, it just went boom and suddenly you were doing tons of flexible fees. So do you want to just talk us through how you saw that progression and what lessons? I guess the key bit is, what advice would you give to other people who are leaders, that is, first adopting flexible fees, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think, if anyone goes into this and thinks, bang, straight from the outset, yeah, we're going to start to pull in fees and big numbers and stuff like that, I think that's the first thing they've got to get correct in their mindset. And I think they've got to prep properly for the arrival of the flexi fees, as we call them, because even though they've obviously been created and sort of transformed from yourself, your process and the way you do it isn't going to be exactly for all agents and all agents' cultures and so forth. So, okay, well, how does flexi fees then come into our culture? As you know, me and Nick were strongly behind it, and we're part of the whole greenhouse sort of flexi fee movement and so forth, and we very much believe in everything that you've been talking about, and we feel very much on the same level. So when we went into the flexi fees, we are. I think the first things to mention, we are highly incentivized business. So, I always took the mickey and said, look, we've got more incentives than a Tesco club card. They're literally, left, right incentive, but we love rewarding people, because those who put their head above the parapet and go for it, we love to reward them. We love to give out the bonuses and pay them extra money and stuff like that. And, to be fair, some of the team members are, they're earning some pretty, you know, chunky wages for those who are going for it, but you have to go for it. So we know we've got that incentivized culture within the business. So when flexi fees came in, so obviously I did training with it, went through it and so forth, and then brought managers out on the training session with yourself, which I strongly suggest that anyone who's going through that process is that they jump on board with one of those training sessions, particularly the key influencers within the business as well, so that it can filter through. And then basically it's a case of, okay, well, look, everyone understands it. Everyone says it's a great idea. How do we then start to take the benefits of what flexi fee represents? Okay, well, look, I've got an incentivized sort of team culture here. So I'm going to start to create an incentivized culture around the flexi fees as well, so that they get rewarded. So, that was one of the things that helped sort of boost the spirit and mentality behind it. And I could probably run through some of the incentives that are put in place to help anyone out there. And I've been talking to a number of agents who've kind of sort of, not been doing as well as we have. And I've kind of discussed sort of, things that can be done in order to help it out and so forth. And incentives is definitely one of those things. And then the other aspect is also just the actual process of presenting the option to the client as well. And in essence, asking that question and not shying away from it. And it's a case of, how do I get it across to my team as in a sense of, it's not a pitch. It's not a pressurized sort of, you got to hunt for a yes on this. This is an option. This is their decision, but this is an option that we can present to them. And the more options that we have, we're going to create more versatility and styles that are going to be aligned with all the forms and different shapes and sizes of clients that we have as well. So it was really sort of getting into that structural process, as in a sense of what we have with a lot of agency is a case of, did you ask the question, ask the question, ask the question, so forth. So talk about the option, okay? And then myself and Callum, for example, who's very good at getting flexi fees as well. We've done some in-house training sessions, but importantly, I also have an internal Teams group with it as well. So all the flexi fee candidates are on it. So like you're running your site as well. So we've got our own mini version of that where I'm sending out sort of stats, updates, charts, and all that sort of stuff, and just creating a real safe place where people can support each other and help each other, because we've got some doing very well, we've got some who are on the way up but need more work and so forth. So I think a mass combination of all those aspects has really helped us to now, as you can see, we're doing some pretty chunky figures on a monthly basis now.
Okay, so if you had your time again and you've got to rewind the clock, is there anything which you would have put in at the beginning, knowing what you know now?
I probably would have. You're going to like this bit, Ian.
Okay, great.
I probably would have. I would have probably put more on the training session with yourself and added a few more in there, because I think as much as I, particularly at that time, sort of say what obviously we had spoken about, it was never from the horse's mouth. And definitely from the feedback that we had on that training session from the manager's front is there was a lot more connectivity to the understanding and the process of it. So I think if I had my time again, I would have probably either had you down to us and got everyone in our training room up here and just had a session, because I think that would have helped straight away just accelerate the whole sort of process. And I think probably just as on my side is a case of probably just gone out and did a bit more frontline myself and just led by example. Look, you definitely, all the directors in the business, Hannah, Nick, myself, it's a case of we are proud that we're hands-on and we are frontline and we're not shy to get out there and so forth. So they're probably, the two.
Great. And a lot of that is actually about credibility, in the sense that one of the advantage I have is I don't think it's necessarily that I deliver the training better than in-house. But I'm going down to do a session next week with a firm in the Midlands, multi-branch business. They've already been on my training session, so they've been to one of the ticketed events. They're going to get me down to do a face-to-face session, because it's effectively, I can talk about the fact that Connells have doubled the size of their pilot. I can talk about the fact that, the Duncan Yeardley and Sears guys are enjoying incredible success, because fundamentally, when we talk about mindset, the number one issue which people have in their head is it won't work here. It's different here. You don't know what it's like here. Yeah. And you have to just bombard them with the evidence of this is a process you can follow to enjoy predictable success. But I think your guys already have that. But then also, in addition to that, it's, let me give all the case studies of how, if they can do it, why can't you?
Mhm.
And that's very much linked to what you were talking about going on the front line, because then if you can come back in and say, hey, I have gone and got a full upfront fee, I've got one which is paid 500, 1,000, 1,500, then suddenly it's like, well, it can be done. You've proven it, and I think that's another really important part. So that credibility piece is super important. Okay,
Well, it's
great.
quite interesting because just on that as well here, because I don't often, go outside of things, but I went out to value a property in my manager's absence the other day, and it was the first time I valued a house in a long time, and I absolutely loved it. Because agency, you talk about the same old stuff for so long. And I'm just, and I said this to all the managers, and I actually got off the phone, I called up, and I just said, valuers within this business, we have so much to talk about. I said, I
Yeah.
didn't even talk about half the stuff. I was talking about flexi fees. I was talking about the collaboration, RAN aspects and all this sort of stuff. And actually, when we had the slider scale on, because one of my colleagues was asking, how do you find it? And I was just saying, forget all this minimum fee entry point stuff. It's just, and the client, and I was a little bit cheeky with it. The client puts her finger on the slider, and I pushed her finger further up the slider. And I said, you're better than that, aren't you? I was just absolutely direct. But I created a situation where, it's going to be my first flexi fee, but it's going to be mid-range and upwards.
Nice.
So, yeah, I was saying, because, we obviously adapted our entry levels, but it was a case of, I was just like, well, we're worth more than that, surely, of the 599. Let's push it up a little bit. So you can have fun with it as well. It doesn't have to
I
all be
love it.
serious.
Said to me about the slider in particular is he says that the reason the slider is so effective is because it gives back control to the client, that they can physically interact with it, that they can actually move it around, and they have a choice. So rather than the fee being something which is presented by me, the agent, to you, and then we sort of negotiate, between us, haggle effectively, it's actually
Yeah.
now totally transparent, totally clear, and you, the client, all options are good for me, the agent. I'm happy with a 2% fee on no sale, no fee. And I'm happy with a 1.5% fee if you pay everything up front. I'm happy with 1.75 in the middle, or somewhere in between. Your choice.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be on that scale? Okay, great. And so just again, a bit of context for everyone else. What sort of performance level, if it's not commercially sensitive, so we can skip this part if it's commercially sensitive, but how much are you now doing out of 4 branches in terms of flexi fees? Where do you think you'll get to this month?
So this month, obviously last month was our best month to date, where we're north of £50,000.
Brilliant.
We're well into the 6 figures now, which is nice. Even though, in terms of classification of timescales, when we started was end of April, that sort of thing. I think with everything that took place in the early stages, we really sort of got the full grip in the last sort of few months. So that's how I sort of really adjudicate the timescales around it. So take into account Tom's already single-handedly doing that probably on his own, not far off. Goals and aspirations definitely for this month is to hit above to what we achieved last month. So £60,000 would be fantastic to achieve. We are just playing, obviously, with the budget, with the bits and pieces that's going on in the world. The market isn't being as fruitful as we would like,
Sure.
and new strategies are being applied. So I think, looking at the instruction numbers, there's probably a few more limitations that may just play a part in that. But I have no doubt, and we're looking at it now, in as penetration. That's the level that we're looking at currently at the moment. We kind of proven what a number of the team members did, and as a team, we've proven that we can do this, that we can get the flexi fees in. But now let's assess the levels. So I'm really focusing on getting our penetration levels up to 35 to 40%. So I've got another incentive running for the last quarter, and then for next year, so 50% penetration level is the goals and aspirations that we'll be working with, which is just going to be a game changer for the business.
Totally. I mean, in terms of when you put that into your, budget for 2026 and what that's going to look like for the business, a 50% penetration, and what would be the average sort of amount of, on those 50%, how much are you generating on average per listing, if you know?
So I don't know the exact amount, but I definitely know in September it would probably say, because if you remember, we reshaped ours
Yeah.
So we've got a much greater volume in now as our minimum sort of setups. So it's 399, 499, 599, 699, and it runs with all the sort of, number at the front of the value of the house pretty much. And then million, it's £1,500 entry point, just because we felt we're giving way too much away at the moment. So that's made a massive impact. Probably on the upfront element minimum, we're probably averaging around sort of the 599 sort of area. But as paying above that, we're probably more around £1,000, a little bit more, 1,500, that sort of area. I think Tom's average will probably be around £4,000, that sort of stuff. So yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think for sort of leaders out there, the metric, like the one, if you only have one number on this, you'll be to take all of your listings and then divide the pound note value of fees that you take up front, divide that by the number of listings to give you a total amount of revenue per listing up front. And I think that's a great measure because that both deals with the penetration. So is it 30%, 40%, 50%, and the amount that you're getting up front on each transaction. And that to me is that's the number which, when I look at our numbers each month, that's the one which I sort of zero in on. Is it 700, 800, £1,000 on average per listing up front? And I think if anyone's sort of north of 500 to 1,000, that's pretty good. That's sort of the right sort of.
Okay.
The right sort
Interesting.
Okay, cool. So let me just ask another question. What about because I imagine if you've got Tom doing a huge amount, and he really is doing a huge amount, there must be other team members within the group who are doing virtually nothing. Is that fair, or has everyone now got on board?
Yeah, everyone's on board, but there are individuals who are doing less, and they've just, like anything in life, you have fast starters and you have slow starters. Does it change their ability as individuals and valuers? No, certainly not. Probably even some of our what we could classify as top valuers are actually struggling to get this going from the beginning, and you could say some of our inexperienced valuers are doing better than them. There's some mixed vibes on that front, and we are dealing, even though we're in Berkshire, we go from Wokingham to Bracknell to Ascot. That is big variance in the styles of markets and the clients that they are, and so forth. But I think with the good thing is, everyone is on board, everyone has obtained a flexi fee, everyone can do it, and it's proven. And I think what we've got, and if we digress a little bit, but something that we've now uniquely got is so we've got these incentives that we've been running from the beginning of the year, and there's been a different variations of colors of those. But what it's identified is who are the strong players. And so we've got some key strong players in the business that all do well. And Tom obviously being, the top performer at the moment, but, Callum's closely built up behind, you've got Marnie doing very well as well. So we've got some strong players there. So we start to recognize those who have the capabilities of producing these flexi fees. So for those who are quite not at that level, but definitely going to be getting there, how do we then positively influence their circumstance? So then, working on the basis of penetration, I've now designed this new incentive where I've got teams. So I've got little teams. So I've got the Priory, I've got the South Drivers, I've got the Horse Racers, and I've got the Kingfishers. So they're basically all street names in amongst all of our offices.
Right.
And within those, you've got, top performers in them. And the interesting thing is, Ian, you've also got cross-brand teams. So there's a couple of Sears in one and a couple of DY in one. So what it's now creating is, there's no more sort of, nice, strong monetary value. We've got a super raffle going on. There's going to be some super cool prizes, but they have to get to a minimum penetration level at 35%. So that's their goals. And whoever at the end of the process gets the highest amount of penetration, then they go into the super raffle where they're going to get some really, really cool prizes at the end of it. But importantly, what it does is it mixes those who are doing very well at it with those who are up and coming doing it. It also means that it doesn't create a division between the brands and offices. It actually forces them to work together. And actually, it's not a case of how much you've got. It's a case of talking to each other. How many instructions have you got? How many flexi fees have you got on that? And so forth. So they've all got their little teams groups now where they communicate, well, I'm not in them. That's their private little one. But I'm constantly, as in AI, I created the badges for each of the teams and so forth. And when, one strikes, the
Yeah,
badge
love it.
goes out, and it's like Kingfishers strike again, in the race, and then the South drivers come through and all this sort of stuff. But the important design behind the whole thing is, one, the intercontinental sort of process of cross brands and people working together, putting the right people with the strengths and the up and comings and so forth and that sort of stuff. So, I'm hopeful that this journey, because my mindset is, right, we can prove we can do the figures. Let's prove we can do penetration. We go into 2026, we've got a clear plan and objective to go with, and we can really discuss our findings throughout that process.
So one thing which you mentioned right at the beginning is that you found that some of your more experienced valuers have been slower to adopt and some of your more junior valuers have been quicker to adopt. As a
Yeah.
broad rule, I'm sure there's exceptions on both sides of the
Yeah,
equation.
yeah.
But as a broad rule, why do you think that is?
Classic saying, isn't it, Ian? Old dog do tricks, isn't it?
I didn't want to use the phrase.
Yeah, it's, and that I say that in the warmest and heartiest of ways, because I love all of my team members and they're amazing at what they do. But it is a case of, it's routine. It's breaking routine, isn't it? And it's a case, and it was no different from certain individuals that I had saying they charge less, I'll lose the house. They'll offer them 0.75%. And I had to, well, we had to, it's not collective, it's not all on me. We had to, shake this out of our system and our belief in our mentality and so forth. And I don't sit here with any concerns about where we are with those who are doing their best that they can, but not quite sort of at the levels that they would want to be or we would want to be, because we know we'll get there. And, it's not a case of we must do it, quickly and it's got to be done like this in a bargain format. It's a case of, right, okay, well, it's clear you can do it. Okay, so you can do it. So you've answered that yourself. So how do we then get that into a more consistent sort of process? And so you tell me what you did on the one that you won. And then suddenly enough, they go, oh, actually, I find it very easily. And more of a case, it's, I brought it more to the attention and we actually discussed it. And some of the ones where they weren't performing as well, I asked them, and I have great relationships with them, that I would just say, won't mention any names, but I'll just say, did you talk about the option? Hand on heart. No, I didn't.
No.
Actually. I said, well, then that's the issue. Then you need to talk about the option.
And if I could narrow this down to like a really simple, clear takeaways, if someone is getting 10%, 20% flexible fees in that sort of range, they are not giving the customer the choice on every valuation appointment. What they are doing is they are making prejudgments about whether or not they think that this is a flexible fee client, and they are choosing selectively based on their instincts as to whether or not they think the customer will like this or hate it. And they are prejudging and then only delivering it where they think it's appropriate. And, there are various phrases about assumption. And, I think it's a really, and to be honest, for any leader out there who's like thinking, oh God, why is Fred only at 10, 20%? Maybe the market's different there. It isn't the market. Probably isn't the training. It's that they are making a prejudgment and not delivering it on a percentage of valuation, whatever that percentage is.
But that is absolutely nail on the head. And it brought light to my mind when you were sort of discussing that, because, that was some of the feedback. It was a case of, I guess we were probably slight to blame as leadership in the beginning, because we were kind of focusing this along with other people we're working with the committed seller aspect. End of the day, anyone who comes to the market, they're committed, mate. It's as simple as that. You will know in your heart and heart, and you have to have integrity, and you have to be honest, and you have to care. The biggest word I coach in business is care. Just care about your actions, care about what you do, and everything on that front. And, if someone was quite clearly, no, I'm just testing the market, see how it goes, not bothered, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, look, discuss the option, but it's not an option you're going to recommend for them, basically. But don't go in there thinking, I'm not going to talk about the option because I don't think they're that committed. Because also there's so many times, and a million times over, where, someone says they're not committed at the early stages, very quickly, they turn out to be a very committed seller and so forth. So look, it's very simple. It's a case of presenting the option. And it's quite interesting. And I was trying to understand the psychology around it as well, because what we do when we go agents, we try and differentiate ourselves, don't we? So you're going against other agents and you want to be different, okay? So if you have something incredibly different to talk about, why are you not talking about it on every occasion?
Absolutely. And it's just the key. And I just think, I'll give you an example with mortgage appointments. It's tangential, so it's not the same, but we've got a reasonably sized financial services business. And when there is a negotiator who doesn't want to do financial services, what they ask for is they ask for more coaching because they lack confidence. Now, sometimes, and as a starting place, that is true. But I have had many people who've worked for me who've asked for coaching after coaching after coaching because they know that because I'm a caring leader, that I'm going to deliver that coaching for them. And that's going to kick the can down the road. And it also puts the onus of responsibility, not just on them, but on the strength of my coaching for their performance and their improvement, rather than the accountability piece, which is if you just ask every single person that you spoke to as a buyer, do you need any help with your mortgage?
Yeah.
Like, as terrible a question as that is, as unsophisticated as an approach as that is,
if
you just did that every single time, you would book more mortgage appointments than you're booking today. And I think the bit which, again, advice to leaders out there is it's very easy if you're a caring person to get sucked into constantly wanting to do more for your team to help them do better. And broadly, that should be our instinct. But there is definitely there's definitely an approach, isn't there? Which is about making sure that there is a quid pro quo. If I do this for you, this is now what I need in return. This is the partnership.
Definitely. And I think, it's exactly that with the, a phrase that I use. So that mentality that you sort of just discussed then with the training aspect is I say to the team, I don't care how you ask the question, so long you have asked the question. We will develop, get the pitch better and so forth. But if you can get your mindset and mentality into just always asking that question, you are naturally going to increase conversion. If you're not going to be asking that question, then there's going to be a reason why you're not earning a lot of commissions here, there, and everywhere and so forth. And, we just had someone who's just come off fresh off the press, joined the team. A young lady called Amy, and she's done a lot of sort of, front of house hospitality, retail, all the good DNA structure that applies to a estate agency and being a people's person. But, I did training with her and just got that sort of mindset into within just a week's period. She's already got about 4 or 5 financial referrals, solicitor referrals, not massive numbers, but very big numbers for being here for less than a week, put it that way.
That's because no one's told her it's hard. That's because no one said, oh, you're going to get all these objections. So she goes in completely fearless. She says, Oliver's told me to ask A, B, C, D. So I'm going to ask A, B, C, D. And guess what? Like it works. And then once you've been here for a while, you've had a couple of people who've objected. And you've had a bit of, your confidence has been knocked because there was one time that one person said, hold on, why are you asking me about my mortgage? Or I've already got my own lawyer, or whatever the objection is. They lose confidence and they stop asking the question, or they start asking not in the way that they were trained. And just, but to go right back to the beginning, this emphasis that you've got on training and development as a business is just such a strength.
Definitely.
And, that's the reason that you're getting the fees that you're getting. Fine. Okay. Well, I've probably reached the end of our time together. So it would be great just if there's any other sort of thoughts or advice that you've got that you would like to share with anyone else who's in your position, managing in this period of change. Are there any other bits which you'd like to sort of share?
Yeah. I think definitely, talking to other agents who are now going down the flexi fee and so forth. I think, look, the important thing is you have to get sort of the right training behind it. And because it's the complete polar opposite to what agents have been doing the whole of their lives, don't expect them to accept it so easily. As much as you, as in a leading position, have been involved in, the whole process, you've got to remember that, you've been along this journey and you're sort of adding this journey to the situation. You are dealing with those who go out on the front line, have been pitching this sort of commission process and have known every different to suddenly doing the complete opposite. Don't underestimate that. And I think make sure you got the good training, whether it's through yourself in and, they go out on your seminars or whatever it may be, or whether it's, some of your videos, training videos or whatever it may be, or getting you down and so forth. So I think crucially, you have to line them up because the challenge is getting their belief and mindset in place. And if you can get that from the outset, then you won't have a slower start. You'll have a faster start. And the other side of things is a case of, and not talking egotistically, but I think we've definitely created the culture and incentive structure behind it that has really supported the process. So I think just think to yourself, yes, it does cost you as a business, but the rewards are hugely greater. And also it's a case of proving a point through the incentives, because when you label out, and it's important to keep incentives fresh, because I hate it in a estate agency where literally I'll go into an estate agent, okay, you've got these incentives. How long have they been around for? 15,000 years. They're just not, they need to be adapted, change, cultures change, the world changes, blah, blah, blah. They need certain things at certain stages of their life and all that jazz. So adapt it accordingly and make it fun and make it fresh as well. So I think that's importantly to come across. And look, the breakdown and I was discussing this with someone not too long ago, put things in perspective. So let's refresh exactly what estate agency represents. So you are Duncan Ballant, and I come up to you in Dragon's Den and I say, right, Ian, I've got this great idea. Okay, so I'm going to go out there, I'm going to sell people's houses. So I'm going to go out there, I'm going to spend my time with my clients. I'm going to do pictures. I'm going to advertise it. I'm going to pay for all my overheads that I possibly have, all the taxes, whatever it may be. And there could be a chance of me selling this house at the end of it. And hopefully I'll get completed. Would you invest in my business? The reality is, it's a very different, reality is, if you're in Dragon's Den, they'll go, that's a crazy setup. You are putting high risks into a situation there, where actually flexi fees is, it's a joint connective adventure now, because the risk is shared. And, we've got to appreciate that 50% or whatever the stock levels are on percentages, doesn't sell, and it's an overhead for us. So it's quite unfair that we should carry all that burden. And also I've just found that those who actually, because the question that I did have is, so if you get all the money up front, then you kind of take your foot off the gas. No, we've like slammed the gas pedal down even further, because the commitment between us and that client is just tripled, quadrupled. And as much as we do it for absolutely every client, we feel there's a lot more pressure on us to over achieve for those clients who are committed and working with us.
I mean, just as a personal example to wrap up with, I have had a client who I put together a proposal to help them transform their estate agency business and work with them one day a month for the next year to build an operating system for their business, non-technology, so sort of like the management operating system. And anyway, I'm delighted to say that they said they want me to do the work, and they said, would you like us to pay you up front, like for the next year? And I sort of felt like I had to take my own medicine and say, yes, of course, that's great.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, so I'm doing my first session with the client next week, and I feel like a massive pressure now to deliver unbelievable value, because effectively, if they pay after the first session, I've got another 11 sessions racked up.
Yeah.
Which I've got to deliver consistent value for a year. To help them grow and develop their already incredibly successful business, to turn it, to take it to the next level.
Well, you're kind of being analyzed differently psychologically, aren't you? So, there's expectation from their side because they're a paid client. So exactly why you're feeling those pressures.
So the extra prep that I'm going to do for that client, they're going to get, and there was no change in the total amount of compensation. It was the same amount whether they paid me every month or they paid me upfront for a year. But I think they wanted to demonstrate their commitment to me, and now I will want to demonstrate my commitment to them in a very personal, one-to-one relationship. So there's no difference. It's been really interesting just sort of going through that process with them over the last week or so, as we've sort of gone backwards and forwards on it. So fascinating. So Oliver, I have taken a number of things away from our conversation today, and I've made notes, and I'll be speaking to people in the Preston Baker management team. I think you're a remarkable sales leader, actually, genuinely. And in the time that I've got to know you, I can see why you guys can command the fees that you can. And it's this culture of training and development and excellence and praise and positivity, I think is absolutely the core of what makes your and Nick's business such a powerhouse within your local marketplace. I think your strategy's bang on, by the way. I know I'm sort of arguing, should there be an alternative in terms of like just get market share? And as I say, I know some very, very successful businesses which do that very well, but I think your strategy's spot on, mate. So keep up the good work, and good luck with the flexible fees. I hope you clear 100K in a month very soon.
Definitely, we will. Okay, cheers, Ian. A pleasure as always. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening and watching the podcast. Oliver, I think, is a remarkably good sales lead. I think he combines what a lot of us aspire to, which is this building of a great culture, investing in his people, a genuine care for his clients and his customers. And the consequence of that is that you can leverage fees that most people could only ever dream of. A lot of us will have thought that the days of 2% no sale, no fee were behind us. He's actually used flexible fees to increase his no sale, no fee, as well as making sure that he's driving remarkable levels of upfront fees. Definitely some great takeaways for me personally. I'll be speaking to the Preston Baker team about some of the incredible insights that he's had. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and I'll look forward to chatting to you next time.